Welcome to the INFOWARS Nightly News. I'm David Knight. It's Thursday, February 12th, 2015. Now, there's a lot of hand-wringing that's going on about the anti-vaxxers, as the people who typically like to portray themselves as being pro-choice demand that vaccines be mandatory, and they're so concerned that it's the affluent and well-educated who are not getting vaccinated. This is a story out of MSN.com. They say Pixar's daycare has one of the lowest vaccination rates in Silicon Valley. They say the tech and science capital of the world, where self-driving cars, futuristic goggles are part of the landscape, also seems to be a hotbed of anti-vaxxers. Maybe they know something you don't. Maybe they want answers. Maybe they can calculate percentages. Maybe they understand what risk is and they want to be informed, and they aren't getting the answers that they want to see, so they're not giving their consent. But of course, there's a big pushback in California, as we'll see. They point out that Disney is the worst offender. They say only 43% of children at Pixar-affiliated daycare center were up to date on their shots, according to California state records. They say this has largely affected the children of educated and affluent parents, this outbreak in California right now. Of course, they offer no proof of that. We do know that the vaccination rates of the people who have been vaccinated, we do know that 14% of the people in this particular outbreak had been vaccinated, yet they continue to repeat that the vaccine is 99% effective. Perhaps that's why the educated and the affluent aren't buying the phony numbers about efficacy. Yet Wired magazine, which originally ran this data, is now talking about we need to have a change in the approach. See, we've done the bad cop thing. Now maybe we need to do the good cop thing. They say there's been a lot of shaming and blaming of the anti-vaccination crowd. And then they go on to repeat that every unvaccinated kid at school threatens the greater community's protection against the disease. I'm sorry, I don't believe that. Like I said, when they don't talk about the real numbers, when there's 14% of the people who got vaccinated that get the disease in this outbreak, 18% in the last outbreak in California a year ago had been vaccinated. That's only an 82% effective rate in that particular case. Yet they continue to repeat as if it was a religious dogma that the vaccines are 99% effective. And of course, there was a 2011 case in New York where 100% of the people who came down with measles were either had records of being vaccinated twice. Patient 0 had been vaccinated twice and had the records. 2 of the 4 people who caught it from her had been vaccinated twice and had records. The other 2 had indications in their blood that they had been vaccinated. Nevertheless, they're going to continue to shame and blame the anti-vaxxers for the failure and the lies of the pharmaceutical industry. But it's not just Wired magazine. It's very interesting to see that there are multiple publications, multiple news sites coming out on the very same day saying, we need to change the strategy about the way that we approach these anti-vaxxers. Maybe we need a kindler, gentler form of medical tyranny. Maybe it's not enough just to be the bad cop and say, get your damn kids vaccinated. Maybe we need to say, oh, let me hold your hand and tell you a little bit about this. This is exactly what Reuters says. A softer, less strident outreach may help to calm U.S. vaccine skeptics. And then they go on to say about 3 paragraphs in the article, as measles cases have spread in the U.S., and a new outbreak of mumps has sickened at least 23 people in the northwest states of Idaho and Washington, much attention has been focused on parents who decline some or all vaccinations for their children. Oh, but wait a minute. What about that vaccine, that mumps outbreak in Washington and Idaho? We've got a story from Adon Salazar on INFOWARS.com today that lays that firmly at the feet of the vaccines. 2 people contract mumps after receiving the mumps vaccine. That would be the MMR vaccine. And of course, with the MMR vaccine, you are vaccinated with live versions of mumps, measles, and rubella at the same time. As I pointed out many times, we said many times, back in the early 60s when I was a kid, they didn't have a vaccine. What parents did was they got real lifetime immunity for their children by exposing them to the vaccines at an age where they weren't a baby, where they weren't an old person or somebody that was grown up. They would send you down to the house to get measles from your neighbor when they came down with measles. But they wouldn't send you from that neighbor who had measles to another neighbor who had mumps to another neighbor who had rubella and have you try to fight off all 3 diseases at once. And of course, that's not the only problem with these vaccines. It's also the adjuvants that they put in to irritate, purposely to irritate the immune system. Is it any wonder that we have so many autoimmune diseases, that we have so many allergies. In this story from Adon Salazar, he says, doctors in Washington are scrambling to explain why 2 MMR vaccine recipients contracted the mumps virus after being vaccinated. Yeah, please explain that to me. When you can explain that to me, then I will be informed. And perhaps I will give you my consent, but not until you can come up with a plausible explanation. CBS affiliate KIRO reports that 2 people from 2 separate counties, King and Snohomish, contracted the mumps post-MMR vaccination, blaming the 2-person outbreak on mumps cases leading out of the University of Idaho. And of course, what do you get when you get the mumps? As they point out, you get headaches, fever, facial swelling. It sounds very much like these kinds of pharmaceutical ads that you see on Fox News and CNN, the very media that are pushing mandatory vaccines, a clear conflict of interest. We see commercials all the time from the large pharmaceutical companies for minor conditions, and then as they're showing you these beautiful pictures in fields with butterflies and dogs running in the high grass, they run off this litany of very dangerous, serious side effects that you can have. So to spare you from the mumps, where you might have headaches, fever, and facial swelling, they're going to expose you to things like death, for example. As Adon points out in his article, the Immunization Action Coalition, the IAC, admits that the MMR vaccine, which has live strains of measles, mumps, and rubella, may, quote, cause a very mild case of the disease they were designed to prevent. And specifically in there, the insert lists death as one of the associated adverse reactions. But of course, as we saw in the 2011 outbreak in New York, one of the reasons that it spread to as many people as it did was because they could not believe that the measles could be spread from a vaccinated person. They said, the most you can get is measles-like symptoms. But of course, we're not going to call that measles. And of course, you cannot spread this to someone else. So their blind adherence to this dogma that is coming out of the CDC is exactly what caused it to spread in that case. So we've seen that measles can be spread from someone vaccinated with the MMR. We see that mumps can be spread from someone with the MMR. Nevertheless, in California, we have a move afoot to remove exemptions, people's personal belief. That's what I would call consent. They want to remove people who object to it, either because they don't feel that they've been informed fully and they don't give their consent, can't have that. Or because maybe they've got religious objections to it, can't have that. We're going to run roughshod over that. As the LA Times points out and applauds Gary Brown, they say California Governor Gary Brown appears open to restricting vaccine waivers. How open-minded of him. Isn't that great? He's going to be open to mandates against your consent. Here's the way they put it. Governor Jerry Brown, who preserved religious exemptions to state vaccination requirements in 2012, on Wednesday, however, appeared open to legislation that would eliminate all but medical waivers. The governor's new flexibility, they go on to say. Flexibility. Flexibility to remove your religious freedom, to remove your informed consent, to enact a medical tyranny on you. That's his new flexibility. That's pretty amazing. So, what does it really mean for public health when we can just have contempt for individuals' rights? What does it mean for public health when the herd immunity is more important than individual health? We're going to be talking to a physician who is head of the Association for the American Association of Physicians and Surgeons. We're going to be talking to her in our interview today. That is an organization that is very concerned about preserving the sanctity of the patient and doctor relationship. It's something we should be very concerned about. There is a lot of dangerous conflict of interest when we have third parties come in and mandate things in the doctor-patient relationship. Third parties like the government, like insurance companies, like pharmaceutical companies. Now, of course, doctors are not perfect either. You should have a second opinion on anything that's serious, but we should preserve that doctor-patient relationship, that individual focus, the idea that we should have a say in life and death health issues. Nevertheless, we see Johnson & Johnson now is aiming to spot who will get a disease. This is kind of like a Minority Report for medical tyranny. No conflict of interest here when Johnson & Johnson is going to be diagnosing you and then selling you the solution to the diagnosis they give you. They say that the company is aimed at nothing less than redefining healthcare. They say they're going to find ways to prevent common, frightening, deadly disorders. And of course, those solutions will be coming from Johnson & Johnson. Here's an example. They say already today, we know that blood testing and then using cholesterol-lowering statin pills to prevent heart attacks. Oh, wait a minute, right there. Look at the side effects from statin drugs. I would never use statin drugs personally. There are a lot of very dangerous side effects. I've looked at the information. You don't have my consent. But that's the kind of thing they're going to be doing. They're going to be diagnosing you, telling you that you have a health condition, and then telling you what you need to do for that. And of course, they point out in the article that Johnson & Johnson is a leading maker of diagnostic tests, which they'll be selling you, vaccines, they'll be selling you surgical equipment, prescription pills, injected biologic medicines, and consumer health products. This is why we need to have a doctor-patient relationship apart from these third parties. And certainly a doctor can sell you something, a bad doctor can misdiagnose things, a bad doctor can prescribe things for you that should not be done to you. You still have the ability to have multiple opinions, second opinions, and ultimately it is your informed opinion that should matter. They point out that they're going to collaborate with university researchers, and the company made $16 billion last year. That's going to buy a lot of university researchers for that kind of money. And of course, when you fund the studies, you can pretty much get them to say whatever you want them to say. Now, it's not just medical tyranny, it is full spectrum tyranny. We see, of course, that Obama is announcing, and they're sending out the signals, and this is the way they always do it, he's going to have executive orders on the cybersecurity data threat. So we've seen this coming. They even point out in the article, this is something they're justifying based on the hack of Sony over the interview. That's not even a legitimate hack. It doesn't threaten anybody. Nobody was harmed with that. But most people say that it was an inside job. Security experts say that it was an inside job. It was not North Korea. Nevertheless, Obama hasn't been able to get CISPA through. The Democrats and those who want to run CISPA through, and I would say the Republicans want it as badly, if not more so than the Democrats do. CISPA was Cyber Intelligence Sharing Protection Act. And so when they started talking about cyber intelligence sharing right after the Sony hack, you knew where this was going. You knew they were bringing back CISPA yet again. It's been defeated twice. The other earlier variants of it, SOPA, ACTA, PIPA, those have also been defeated, not only here in America, but abroad in Western democracies. So they're going to do it by executive order, or they're going to do it by the treaties. They've got multiple ways they're going to try to put this through. Now, intelligence sharing is not there to protect you. It's not there to protect the public. It's there to protect the snitches in multinational corporations who are collecting your data and turning this over to the government. It's to protect them from legal charges as well as from lawsuits for violating your privacy. That's what the intelligence sharing is set up to protect. It's set up to protect the corporations from being sued. This is coming from Reuters. It says President Barack Obama is expected to announce an executive order directing the government and companies to share more information. Of course, you know the government's not going to be sharing any information. They don't give us any information about anything, as we'll see in the next story. They're going to share information about cyberspace security threats in response to attacks like that on Sony Entertainment. And they point out, as in other policy areas where Obama has been unable to get legislation through the now Republican-controlled Congress, the White House is going to do whatever they want. Let's take an analogy. Let's say that you had a sheriff in town, and the sheriff said, I've been trying to get the town to pass a law to outlaw fill in the blank. I don't care what it is. I want them to outlaw that and put heavy fines and jail terms on that. But I just can't get the town council to do anything. So I'm going to start arresting and fining people on my own because they won't do what I tell them to do. That's exactly what Obama is doing. So we asked a question at INFOWARS.com, why is Obama doing this? And of course, we all know the answer. They want to control the press. And the only free press that exists today is on the internet. In a story from Kit Daniels up on INFOWARS.com today, he says the mainstream media's declining influence is motivating the federal government to regulate the internet because controlling information is the most powerful way to control the public. Absolutely. That has